Hey, welcome back to Com225, and today we're going to be looking how to research and supporting material, what that kind of like looks like if you've never researched before. You're going to see that with developing supporting material, good speeches, we need to have it. And I know I kind of talked a little bit about this in the APA lecture of how credible sources are so important for us to have. It's going to help us feel trustworthy, and our audience is going to like our message that much more. And so, good speeches, they're going to contain relevant, motivating, and then also audience centered material. I like this because thinking, who is my audience and what type of material will they appreciate? How can my information be centered around my audience so they like what I'm talking about, but it's also supported in a way that they like as well? Now, the main reason of why we're here together is to talk about these 5 different ways of what supporting material can ultimately look like. So, our first one is examples. It seems so simple, but having examples is a great way to show that you can to illustrate a specific point so that your audience can maybe relate to it. This is your definition of example, and it's a typical instance of something. Does it always happen in this specific way? No, but maybe it does typically. Now, without examples, sometimes your audience can get kind of lost in all of the abstract statements. That's why, like in class, you'll ask people like, can you give me an example of that? Let's dive deeper into it so we can explain it and just comprehend it a little deeper. Brief examples, they're going to give you a single illustration of a point of a specific thing that happened. Whereas extended examples, a little bit of the opposite. It's going to be an extended illustration, quite a lengthy explanation of maybe an idea, an item, an event. And this will allow the speaker to really create a more detailed picture for the audience. Now, it's just shorter and longer here. Then we also have hypotheticals, which you're trying to make a point about something that could happen in the future. Maybe it hasn't, but you have some, argument that maybe it could go this specific way. And so hypotheticals are like, what could this look like? What could happen? Now, alongside with offering examples, we have sharing stories. When I went to grad school, I learned about a form of collecting data, and it was autoethnography and ethnography. And that's kind of observing other people. Autoethnography is just also focusing on yourself and sharing your story. And so, with stories, telling of a chain of events, what happened? You're giving the topic, the main characters, the overall message, and then the outcome with these narratives, it's going to help us make sense then of the experience and then maybe also our own experience too that we're dealing with. Now, all stories are going to possess a character and then a challenge or a conflict and then a resolution. I like thinking about this because some of my favorite movies are like indie films that really don't have a point. It just shows a day in the life. They're just enjoying their weekend, and maybe there's not this extreme, problem that's happening or resolution. It's just a movie about life. And so with stories, a lot of times we have this conflict, we have this challenge, and we don't really have that luxury of like just talking about life. Maybe with examples, we can offer what life could look like. Now, we also have brief stories are interesting, thinking about how you can make it a little anecdotal of making it humorous, trying to have a recognizable moral. What do we gain from this message? Think about childhood stories that you've heard of, and it's like, well, what does this mean? Like, it has a deeper meaning than you didn't think about. That's why we have book clubs, that's why we have discussions about it. I really love this quote, and it says, when you include a compelling story in your speech, you're going to reach a deeper part of the audience members' brains where emotion and memory, they're going to work together. I love that because you never know how you're going to reach your audience. You never know how you're going to make those connections and have people really like feel what it is they're talking about. But with their compelling storytelling, with their compelling speaking, you're going to have that opportunity to make those strong connections. Now we have drawing on testimony. And this is looking at research of whether that you saw or someone else saw or whether they collected or you collected it. Testimony, this can be firsthand accounts. You were there, eyewitness accounts, and also getting people's opinions. We have expert testimony, and this is information from trained professionals in the field. I think this is a good example of like in the court system when they have an expert testimony come in of someone who works in the field so then they can explain things and they know what they're talking about. I know that I know nothing about cars, so I would be a terrible expert testimony. And also, why would I ever be an expert testimony for that? I would think that my dad, who works in cars, he would be a great person who could be an expert testimony because that's his profession. That's been his profession for, 30 plus years. Now we also have lay testimony, which this is then testimony from those non-experts, maybe the people that just saw it. So if we're talking about a car crash, if I saw it happen, I could give lay testimony because I saw it, but maybe my explanation won't be as clear as my dad's would because he's an expert in that. With this testimony, we can have that credibility of people backing up, supporting, and informing for us and with us. Now, I think statistics, this is a great way to provide support for whatever it is you're talking about. With facts, this is going to help us just become a stronger speaker, trying to have, those actual events, dates, times, people, places, all of that, things that happened. And so listeners, they're not going to likely accept our statements as factual unless we have the credible sources. Unless we say, like, I read this in a specific article, I saw this in a specific video from this specific person. That's just going to help us build that credibility. Now, for using statistics, I think that this is a great way to do this, especially for this class and especially for this speech. But having that quantified evidence, trying to summarize, maybe comparing things. So we can use frequencies of how often something happens, the percentages of what this looks like in our world, and then the averages of like typically what does this look like. It's really amazing how if you do some research, you can find statistics on whatever topic it is that you're going to pick. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about though is presenting your statistics ethically. Because a lot of times we can find numbers and we think, oh, this number means everything. But then when you look into the research, it's actually not that big of a deal. And so you want to use reliable statistics. Again, it's all about credibility here. And then you want to present statistics in context. So make sure it's related to what you're talking about. But here's the biggest one here, and it's cherry picking. I want you to avoid with cherry picking. When we cherry pick, we're choosing statistics that are going to support our argument, and then that's it. But usually there's a bigger picture that's occurring here. So make sure that we're ethically looking at what does this number truly represent? If this one research article looked at 10 people and 9 of them all said yes and 1 of them said no, and so we say 90% of people said yes, it's like, wow, that's a pretty big number. But then let's ethically look at it and let's dive a little deeper and okay, it's only 10 people, maybe that's not that big of a deal. So you want to avoid confusing statistics with the absolute truth. Just be careful with what you're using. Make sure that you're proud of the resources you found. Make sure you're proud of how credible you're going to come across. And then you're going to become that much of a stronger public speaker. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I know it was a little bit on the shorter end, but this is just helping us get in that mind zone of how do I find research? How can I find credible sources to make me become a credible presenter? If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll see you later in the next one.